Hi, I'm Dr. Alan Badeau, and welcome back to AI Today. Here we're exploring AI's potential as well as its ethical challenges. And this week we are going to continue the topic that we briefly touched on around bias and AI and its associated bias and things that we can do to protect ourselves and things that we can do to recognize it in different types of responses that we get back, or even different types of data that we have to use. So again, we are very lucky to welcome back Mr. Bruce Schneier, a renowned security technologist, as well as an author and a faculty associate at the Harvard Kennedy School Carr Center for Human Rights Policy, and a fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. Bruce, it's great to have you back. Thank you again for being here.
It's mostly a good, that's a mostly good intro. I'll kind of leave it, but we should talk about the affiliations are complicated at Harvard, but it is nice to be here. And funny,
yes, they are.
The intro to this segment, and I'm realizing yet again that every single AI visual the media uses is terrible. There's no way to get any good visuals in this space.
That's right. That's exactly right. Even when you have the AI try to generate it itself, it's even worse, right?
That is certainly true.
Yeah. So Bruce, from a bias perspective, we're always trying to recognize it. We're always trying to tell our viewers how they can either avoid it, recognize it, or at least understand what it's doing. What sort of advice do you have for our viewership in how they can recognize bias in some of the responses that they get back from an AI model?
It's no different than recognizing bias in responses you get back from humans you ask questions to. I mean, today's generative AIs are just reflecting the corpus of data they're trained on, which is all of us. And this is, in a sense, the very definition of systemic bias, right? The system is just imbued with bias because we humans are, and then the system is trained on it and produces it. I mean, but in a sense, this is no different from, I don't know, a hiring system, or a policing system, or a system for bail or loans or student admissions. Even if they are administered wholly by humans, right? No AI involved. You recognize bias in any of those things by looking at the output. Now, you probably can't say any one decision is biased because it's one decision, but if I can look at all of a university's admissions, or all of a bank's loan, the loans they award, right? And we can see, is that fair? Is that biased? And we in society have a lot of ways of doing this. It doesn't require knowing the internals, right? I can't open up a police officer's brain and see how the neurons fire. All I can look at is the output. And in a sense, that is no different from these non-human decision-making systems. We look at their output and we see if it is biased. And this is hard, right? Bias has a lot of different definitions, right? Fairness has different definitions that are contradictory. And it is not a machine, it's not a machine processed for what is fair. We humans have to tell the machine what is fair, and the machine can do that. But that is a very human decision to make. So that is what we do. There's no difference in most ways.
Yeah, and I think we see all the time where when we go to conferences, we talk to folks, we talk to other AI folks, sometimes they put an awful lot of emphasis on bias and trying to de-bias systems across the board, and they're going to get more data to try to eliminate as much bias as they can from those systems. What are your thoughts on ways that AI experts and folks that are doing this sort of thing can, if they can't eliminate it, they should at least be transparent? So how do we start to drive that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's regulation. Right? You have to be forced to. Right? For-profit companies are not going to do that. They are going to create the product for the mean customer, which is, the straight white Western guy. Right? That's what it's going to be. And if we as society expect the companies to make their products and services fair to everybody, we have to force that. Sometimes it's a matter of subtle. I mean, maybe the early image generators, when you asked for an image of a doctor, it gave you a male. When you asked for an image of a criminal, it gave you a blackface, right? That's one kind of bias. A wholly other is some of the facial recognition systems worked better on light-skinned faces than dark-skinned faces. And, that's a problem of testing, right? You're not testing on a broad swath of humanity. Some of the systems for speech recognition worked less well with higher pitched voices, right? And again, who's in the room when there's testing? So there's different kinds of bias, and it's really what we as society expect, right? I mean, the company could, make an AI that works for straight white guys. Now, do we want that? Would we allow that? Or is that an okay market segment for them to go after? Again, these are really not AI questions. These are fundamental societal questions, which makes them hard. Because right now in society, we tend to defer to money, the corporations, and we don't regulate. So we are unlikely to make these demands. But they're important because they're going to reflect us. And a lot of it isn't the AI. Think of generative AI. There's a lot going on between the query you type and what the AI gets, and what the AI produces and what you read. And a lot of the anti-bias happens in that middle layer. Like, even if we can't debias the AI because it's trained on Reddit and Reddit sucks, we can filter the input and output in ways that we think are better. And systems are doing that. You type a query and it'll be changed, or it'll be added to in ways that reduce bias. Sometimes there's overcompensation. One of the recent, I think, was Google image models overcompensated. You asked for Norse kings and you got women.
That's right.
Right? Now, so this is an iterative process. We will figure this out. But, I think in a lot of cases, companies want to do the right thing as long as it's not too expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? If it's too expensive, hell with the right thing, we want to make money. But as long as it's cheap, they'll do the right thing.
Yeah, and I think we've seen even a complete brand new market open up around AI and companies that are creating AI, these large language models, to monitor bias from other large language models.
Yeah,
and it's all over the place.
I think that largely is not going to work. I mean, it'll work. It'll work in practice, but not in theory, if that makes any sense. I mean, the theory of AIs watching AIs is completely flawed, but in practice, you can probably get some of the way there by having different AIs monitor each other, just like different humans might monitor each other. Right? If I write something, I send it to my editor who says, this sentence here maybe is not okay. You shouldn't say that. Right? And they're acting as a check on me.
That's right.
So yes, we can certainly do that. Again, the question is, what is the will? Are the companies being forced to? By who? Under threat of what sanctions? Because the market's only going to push it so far. Right? The profitability limits what will be done. And the companies, we see that even non-AI, just look at social media and democracy. Right? They're willing to do some, but not a lot to make sure democracy survives. As long as it's cheap, they're in, but once it affects their profits, they're not. And AI is going to be no different.
That's right. Yeah, and I think social media has been a huge driver around bias and AI, and I think we've seen, there is so much generated AI generated material that it's just popping out on Instagram and Facebook and all those other social media platforms.
So this is bad. I mean, the term I've heard, I just heard it last week, is slop. Right, which is cheap AI generated content, and whether it's images or posts or text or comments, it's just AI stuff that is now everywhere, gumming up everything, and now your feed is filled with it. And people think this might be existential for social media, that if all the slop is out there, I mean, already Facebook doesn't let you talk to your friends. It's now feeds.
Yeah.
But if it's like AI generated feeds that aren't even real, it feels like an existential moment. So we'll see, right? Will the companies step up and say, we want to prioritize human connection because that's kind of what our brand's about, or we're just going to go to the highest bidder because that's what our brand's all about.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems like once again we continue to have that go back where you've got to have some sort of human involvement in there. We still have to be the adults in the room sometimes, and if it's all AI and we're not in the room, then it's just the Wild West, I think, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I mean, people have been writing about this. What does discourse look like when it's filled with artificial personas? And that would be like the fact that you and I are talking here. At least assume it's you. It could be an AI avatar. Your background's blurred, which is suspicious, but I'm going
That's
to
right.
assume it's you, at least for now. Like next
For
time,
now.
you don't know, right? There's a connection here, and if I'm talking to an artificial person, I perceive this connection when there's not, which really means I'm being manipulated by
Yes.
someone, because someone is controlling the AI on the other end. So now this really is very much a money by speech at even a greater degree than advertising, right? The money by speech debates of the last decade.
That's right.
So it's going to be interesting to watch how we do this.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to be talking more about this as we move forward. This is a topic that is not going to be solved, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. So that's for sure. Bruce, it's always fantastic to have you on the show. Love talking to you. Love picking your brain. Where can people find you at?
I am at Schneier.com, which is where my essays and blog posts and books and writings and everything is.
Yeah, it's
No, I'm not on
fantastic. I
social media. It
encourage
makes me a
everybody.
freak, but it's the way it goes.
Well, I encourage everybody to go out and take a look at it. It's fantastic material. So much to learn about and learn from Bruce and his papers that he has out there. Bruce, thank you again, and we will be
I'll
right
see you
back
AI
after.
Avatar next time.
I'll see you. We'll be right back after our short commercial break. Thank you. Welcome back to AI Today. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Badeau, and I'm fortunate enough to have back Dr. Pamela Gay, astrophysicist and director of CosmoQuest, a regular on the show. She's fantastic, a citizen science leader really in the field, and she is bridging the gap between what professional researchers are doing and everyday space enthusiasts. And her podcast is called Escape Velocity Space News, and I encourage you to listen to her on Saturday nights at 9 p.m. on Now Media stations. And Dr. Gay, again, thank you for being here. Wonderful to have you back.
It's really my pleasure. This is such an important topic that is really affecting everything.
Yeah, it sure is. And we're going to continue the discussion from last week because one show is just not quite enough for something like this around bias. And I think folks are seeing more in the media and recognizing that it really is impacting every single thing in their life, whether they go to the airport, whether they do internet searches, whether they're using Google or whatever that is. And this week, I really want to touch on some specifics around how these models are behaving and where they are showing up in certain places. And so I think from your perspective, let's focus on some of the imaging technology first. Where do you think, or how do you think we can prepare folks for some of the things that they may see incidentally, and how to handle that?
One of the biggest problems we've been dealing with is inherited. If you go to any stock image repository, whether it be Getty or Alame or anything in between, and you type in the name of a profession, it will give you the stereotyped gender of that profession and inevitably a white person. And it's become a running joke. Now, the problem is that we are using this stock imagery as well as things like Flickr and other sites, to then train all of these different AI image producing software, whether it be Midjourney or Google's Gemini. When you go and you say, give me an astronomer, it's inevitably going to give you a gray-haired white male unless it's been programmed specifically to not do that, in which case hilarity just might ensue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've on my website you'll see some AI generated pictures, and it's kind of funny, and some of them that I of course have not put up there because they were even a little too biased for what I wanted to show to get the message across. But I mean, when we have kids that are using this, we have
Yes.
a lot of things. I think that's where something that we really have to pay attention to, and how they are interacting with these tools. And AI watching AI is one of the things that they're trying to do. It's created an entire market space for that. What do you think about that from an AI perspective? How do you feel about AI watching itself?
I think that we're going to end up with a great deal of both stereotyping bias, where the AI is like, I know this is supposed to be this thing, therefore I shall make it this thing, as well as a whole lot of confirmation bias, where we as human beings who are then going in and saying, well, is it doing the correct thing? We're simply going to take our our expectations, and when our expectations are met, we're going to say good enough. And so the computers are simply going to build on the already existing biases in the system, propagate them further, and the human beings who are reviewing it, unless they're being careful and they're actually comparing statistics to what the output is coming from, we're just going to propagate the, well, what's the best way to get a lower income? Apply to be a woman engineer instead of an engineer. It's just going to propagate straight through the system as the stereotypes, as the existing biases just get moved forward by the software.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And one of the scary things is that the amount of data that is available to bias a system that is easy to grab from the internet is tremendous. It's scary how easy it is to get. I was doing some research over the weekend, and I found a repository that, and I'm not going to say where it was at, but you can teach AI to be more biased in a certain direction, and no quantification. It'll pretend that it wants to help you when it's really not trying to help you type scenario, and that's kind of scary. And as we start using these AI systems for identification, for monitoring our systems, what can people do to help either overcome some of those challenges, or just come to the realities that that's the day and age that we're living in now?
At a certain level, all of us have to be that marketing person who stages the image to contain people of every different demographic. It's very important to provide role models at every step. Little girls often, when asked if they wanted to be astronauts, said no, because all the examples of astronauts that they were given were men. And then when they heard about Sally Ride, suddenly it became different. When we went from manned space program to human space program, that changed who was applying. We're going to have to be the marketing person, the HR person who is putting down this is the statistics we want to represent because this is society, not this is who's currently in the workforce, not the stereotype that are in the stock image repository. We need to force our AI to reflect the demographics of what they're representing. Now, this can get messy. There was a catastrophe, at least that's the word I'm going to choose to use, with Google's Gemini, where it was the programmers attempted to make it more nuanced, and when asked to provide images of typical Nazi soldiers, they were women who were Asian and Black, as well as Black men. And that isn't exactly what Nazi soldiers looked like. So we have to
No.
be careful and figure out how to train our software to actually read the history books.
That's right. That's right. There is some common sense that AI just doesn't have yet. Um, and I don't. Well, the good thing is it's not going to have it anytime soon. But it is something that we have to always remember that we have to be the adult in the room, and that's what I'm telling folks now. You've got to be the adult in the room. You can't be the another AI inside of that system. And I think from that perspective, I know a lot of folks that I talk to are worried about AI for biometrics, for security, for those kind of things. How can we make those kind of systems perform better than the commercially available systems that are out there?
We simply have to remember you have to test on all the different kinds of humans that your software is going to be interacting with. The famous example of this is people of color not triggering motion sensitive lighting, especially in hotel hallways. There is nothing worse than being a very dark skinned person and just trying to get to your hotel room, and the hotel is like, you shall do it in darkness.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't train with a truly representative sample, we're going to miss things. This comes up in medicine a lot, where they will choose to only test on men, and women's bodies are a bit different. And so things don't work the same. We have also started to find that there are certain genetic relationships where people of certain subgroups just don't respond to medications the same way.
That's right.
And we are causing people to get worse medical care, to have worse commercial experiences, to generally not have equal access because we aren't taking the time to do representative testing of UI, UX, of drug studies at any level. We're simply taking who shows up instead of recruiting from populations that might often be weary or often be ignored.
Yeah, and I think from a research perspective, it's so easy to get data. It doesn't mean it's
Yes.
good data. It's You can use it to train, and it's easy to get, and the AI is going to give you an answer. And then you're going to ask it the same questions that you got from the data. And folks have become a little bit lazy in some cases around really working hard to go get good data, get a good distribution of that data, and then start to ask it questions that will help with that. And I think these large language models they need so much data. You're not quite sure where and how biased it's really going to be.
And the biases crop up in very weird places. There was a large galaxy study from Galaxy Zoo in the early 2010s, where they had just regular everyday human beings classify tens of thousands of galaxies and look to see if the spiral galaxies were oriented like the letter S or like a curly letter Z. And it turned out that because human beings are right-handed predominantly, when they couldn't clearly see what direction the orientation is, because some galaxies are just hard to study, a bias cropped up that was a humans are right-handed related bias, not a bias in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
These kinds of extremely subtle biases exist in all kinds of data. And if we aren't looking to say, is this statistically rigorous? Do I actually understand why the data points are skewing this way or that? And understand the underlying causes of what I'm seeing. When we go to use that data to train, and this is most devastating in HR, where things like, what is your name? Did you go to a state school or a private school, are inadvertently becoming the biases that are getting introduced to reviewing resumes.
Mm-hmm.
These human biases that we aren't reflecting on enough are just getting propagated by AI. We must understand our bias before we use our data to train the machine and inadvertently train it to be even more biased than we are.
That's exactly right. And Dr. Gay, I really appreciate you being here. I will say I am biased. I am still protesting for Pluto, still upset about that. But maybe a new Planet 9 is gonna show up pretty quick. But I appreciate you being here. I love having discussions with you. It's fantastic. Where can folks find you?
Look for me over at cosmoquest.org for all the science you can find. And I personally am Star Strider everywhere on the internet. Look for the answers. And if you go back far enough, you'll find out I'm Team Ceres. I'm good with Pluto becoming a planet, but you have to give me back Ceres, the OG former planet.
That's fantastic. I love that. Maybe we can dedicate a show for that topic just by itself. So again, Dr. Gay, thank you for being here. And I encourage everybody to come back after a short commercial break. Hi, I'm Dr. Alan Badeau, and welcome to AI Today. Here we're exploring AI's potential and ethical challenges. And this week, I'm excited that we're going to talk about a very hot topic. We're going to talk about data. We're going to talk about data bias and data transparency. And I'm pleased to have back this week Dr. Pamela Gay, astrophysicist and director of CosmoQuest. You guys have seen her on the show before. Very excited to have her back. She is leading the citizen scientist programs and really spearheading that for everybody that really wants to get invested in some sort of technology and science. She's got a podcast. It's called Escape Velocity Space News, and she can be heard Saturday nights at 9 p.m. on Now Media Stations. Dr. Gay, thank you for joining us again.
It's my pleasure, Alan. It's so good to get to talk about these complex topics.
Yeah, this one is especially complex simply because we've had so many different events that have taken place over the past year or so, and whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's some of these models not behaving the way that they should, whether it's folks that are using the models inappropriately and it just happens they didn't check it and it lies. What are some of your thoughts when you look at the bigger picture around data representation and how folks should be presenting the information that they get from these large language models?
I think the number one thing that folks need to do is admit when they're using large language models and understand their limitations. My favorite examples, and there's so many of them, I think the most famous is the legal case where the lawyers went to ChatGPT, asked it to help them write their legal brief, and it quoted case law that did not exist. And what people don't seem to understand about software like ChatGPT is they are writing in the style of. They are not actually doing the research. They are not actually reviewing the case law. They are saying, this is what a legal brief should look like, and generating one, and in some cases hallucinating the references. So what we need to get in the habit of doing is recognizing we as human beings, we often have done the research, or we need to ask the machine to do the research instead of to just write the brief. You can say, dear software, go forth and find me these specific examples and give me links to them. And in some cases, it will succeed. In other cases, it will say, I don't have access to the internet. I don't have access to whatever you're trying to do. And in recognizing where its limits are, and this is where we really need to train people better, then we can start to use it. Or, I mean, really what it's good for is a human being writes the thing and we say, dear machine that actually probably knows grammar better than I do, can you update what I'm doing? Can you point out failures in what I'm doing? Can you summarize what I'm doing so I know I actually said the things I mean to say? We now have a built-in editor that can allow us to change our voice to the voice of whatever we want while using our own words. Once we recognize it's an assistant and not a replacement, we will be able to use large language models much more fully. And that whole they hallucinate is a bit problematic.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I actually experienced that myself when I had a customer. They were looking for some analysis on solar flares, and I thought, hey, I don't have time to go out and look for data. And I said, ChatGPT, can you please go find me some sources of, university solar flare data? And it came back and it gave me a URL, and it was about 16 lines long. I should have tripped a message for me that it was such a long URL. And I thought, okay, you know what? I'll go try. And I went to the university. I kept going, and it was accurate. And then the last 4 links that it provided to me were just wrong. So it got half of it right and the last half of it wrong. And so, of course, I wound up having to go do it myself. But still, I mean, it tells you in such a convincing way that you want to believe it, but you just got to check it. And I think that's an important thing that folks are finding out from a consequences perspective. That legal case is really fantastic. When you look at the unintended consequences that those folks faced, of course, they had to go through a bar review and all this other stuff. What do folks, though, at home need to think about when they're looking at some of those unintended consequences for doing stuff like that?
Well, it's more than just having it generate your legal briefs. People are now using large language models to do things like generating cover letters for jobs. And we're getting to the point that it's about to be machines all the way down. We have software that has been trained by, here are all the resumes we've received for the past 3 years. Here is who we accepted for each of these jobs. Now learn from us how to hire people. So the machine has been trained based off of our own human biases to pick resumes to forward for interviews. Now people are starting to write their resumes, write their cover letters using generative AI. If machines are generating the resumes based on what they know of who is hired, and if machines are then figuring out who to hire based on the resumes, where is the human being? And also, everything we're doing is obscuring sometimes that excellent small thing that makes one candidate so much better than another that a machine won't know about, because a machine is looking to make everyone cooker cutter identical. It's starting to become a version of the book Metropolis, where every employee wears the linen suit, the black cap, and identical shoes. We are so much more than what the AI wants us to be, but the AI is writing for the AI, and it's AI all the way down.
That's exactly right. It feels a little bit like Mr. Smith from the Matrix sometimes, the candidates that you get from the AI. And speaking of that, I think one of the things that I've seen this week, I've seen a lot of corporate executives on the news talking about the protests that are going on and how they're going to find folks and they're going to use their AI to filter those candidates out based on some of those actions. Of course, what ethical dilemmas does that really pose for us as a society as we start to move forward?
Well, we have to worry about the machines. First of all, are going to catch a lot of innocent people involved. You have students who are just trying to get from one class to another, who look at the wrong camera at the wrong time, and now they're on a YouTube video, now they're on a TikTok, and they can be identified. And they weren't doing anything. Then we also have all of the students who are knowingly out there, knowingly protesting, who are in danger because they're in these videos and they're being identified. They're not breaking the law. They are acting on their conscience. They didn't ask to be doxxed, but now AI is essentially in a position to begin to dox people. And we live in a world where we have people saying we need to punish people who are out there doing that. And puts us in a position where AI allows vigilante justice in a way we never anticipated. And not everyone should become Batman. And AI is allowing everyone to become Batman online, and the consequences can be extremely real. These kids, they've been monitored their entire life. I look back at like what you and I were probably capable of doing when we were kids and could head for the hills on our bicycles, and no one knew where we were, and we were told stay within a block, and we were 5 miles away. At least I was 5 miles away.
Yep.
And kids today can't do that. They are being monitored from the cell phones that they have. It's sometimes in the form of a watch since they're toddlers, giving away their locations. Their communications are being monitored in ways, I mean, our parents could see the phone bills, but as long as it was a local call, parents didn't care. And now it's turning into, as adults, we're being monitored through CCTV, we're being monitored through other people's social media in ways we don't have choices about. And it's going to start to become one of these dystopian futures where we are followed forever and not allowed to change our perspectives. And that, I think, is one of the most dangerous things. Human beings don't have a full sense of right and wrong. They don't have full cognitive abilities until they're in their late 20s. They're most of the way there, but it's not until we're in our late 20s that our brain is fully developed. And if youth are online, are being captured online, and that is now becoming part of their permanent record, and it is completely inescapable, we are essentially going to punish people who aren't fully baked for following their conscience. And I don't want to live in a society where people are encouraged to stop following their conscience because they're afraid that the machine is going to ruin their life.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's an important concept that folks need to really embrace, because one, AI doesn't have context when it's looking at things a lot of the times, especially in many of the cases that are out there, peaceful protests. The AI isn't going to be able to tell the difference in some cases because it doesn't have all of the information and the data that's around there. But then also, when you look at the historical capabilities of AI, the decision capacity of AI, I think that's where we lack significant capabilities from just relying on the AI to make some of those decisions. And I just really am hesitant for folks to just rely solely on AI without getting all of the information that's out there, because it really ties into the next piece around your data privacy, your owning, citizens of the US owning their digital credentials and getting those sorts of things back. How do you think we can move forward and really allow our information that is out on the internet, if it is even possible anymore, to gain back our digital footprint and start to own that information?
It is trickier than I think most people realize. In a lot of states, if you vote, if you're registered to vote, all of that information is in the public record. So someone's legal name and their home address, because they registered to vote, can be downloaded. It may require filling out paperwork and paying a fee, but all that information is out there. Now, if then these folks have a Facebook page, mine is currently up on screen, you can start to see what these people are doing. You can start to put together, oh, here's this picture of this person, and you can start to create that full data tracking of this is where they've been, this is what they're doing. It's open game for not just advertisers to figure out, oh, she owns a dog, I should be sending her information for BarkBox, for Chewy's, for whatever is the latest big company that has the money to buy records of everyone who posts dogs on the internet. But it also starts to get to the point where we have to worry about stalkers and no longer having the ability, no matter how careful we are, to not make ourselves vulnerable. I, as a professional who is on the internet, am aware people now know I am always at First Fridays at the St. Louis Science Center, so I might as well publicize I'm at First Fridays at the St. Louis Science Center. But other people may fall prey to that bot that sends them a friend request on Facebook, and they're cute, so you say yes to the friend request. And now that bot has access to your personal goings on, a quick data download from your local government has all of your location information. And now the machines can literally track down everything we're doing and put that information for sale. Now, imagine that you are taking a friend to and from chemotherapy. That's not your health, but your location is now out there.
Mhm.
A lot of sites track us through cookies, track us through where we're logged in. Our position is always known. Now, that information could go for sale, and suddenly it's that issue of the woman who was sent advertisements for pregnancy stuff from Target because the machine learning algorithm figured out she was pregnant and let her family know before she did. Well,
Mhm.
now we can have someone who isn't actually sick, someone who doesn't actually have a pregnancy, getting tagged by this equipment, and that's a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is definitely a hot topic. We're going to hit on it a lot more during this show. Dr. Gay, where can folks find you at?
You can find me professionally at CosmoQuest X talking all about science. And if you want to see those cute dog pictures, I'm Star Strider with a Y everywhere on the internet.
That's great. Well, thank you again. Stay with us, and we'll be right back after a short commercial break. Hi, I'm Dr. Alan Badeau, and welcome back to AI Today. Here exploring AI's extraordinary potential and ethical challenges. And today, we're talking about bias. We're talking about the algorithmic integrity of these AI models. And I'm excited to welcome back Dr. Jay Lee, a visionary in industrial AI. He's a Clark Distinguished Chair and Professor at the University of Maryland, go Terrapins, and the Director of the Industrial AI Center in the Mechanical Engineering Department. Dr. Lee, thank you for joining us again today.
Well, thank you for having me again.
Dr. Lee, one of the things that is a very hot topic right now is, bias. It's the model integrity, it's data integrity. And I think from your perspective, algorithmic transparency is something that you really take to heart because of all the quality assurance that you're working through. Can you explain how you are really embracing algorithmic transparency and the need for the users of AI to understand how the AI is making these decisions?
Well, I think in general, right, when we develop algorithm, it's not about try and error, right? Something like engineering, because I'm an engineer, right? So in engineering, we often call system engineering. Why we call system engineering? From the way how you design things, how you do simulation, how you do fabrication, engineering, integration, and life cycle support, whole life cycle, right? So what AI development is not about algorithm, whoever invents something, but when you implement the algorithm, validate it, then how can other people also can debug it, right? So transparency to some extent is about how you physically show the smaller the last small loops of a domain loop. Domain loop means I'm an expert. I use my judgment to make that kind of a special code, right? Or write some special criterion and make decision. So that's very important. But of course, some are intellectual property. They may not share with you. So there are a lot of open source code out there. You can have the GitHub, you can download the code, but you may not be able to see the domain-driven kind of a thinking process. The reason is there's intellectual property, right? But for me, assume that's in the same organization, when somebody want to share, you have to be able to see the flow chart, how the code develop, algorithm develop, how the validation process done, and how the troubleshooting process, right? So eventually somebody else can repeat what you have done. If we are the company, if only one person can do their job, nobody else can repeat that person's job. Something wrong. Am I correct?
Yes,
We are
yes,
one
yes,
company.
yes.
We have to support our customers. You cannot say, oh, if this person left the company, that's it. I don't think that's a practical, that's the legally correct, all right? So we have to support our customer in the life cycle of whatever you developed. But that's where you have the transparency is important. Number two, traceability. How you develop the process, how you validate the process, which data do you use? We have to know, right? Eventually, you have to be accountable in terms of what you do, not just using today. Some people using free open source code. Yeah, but again, it's not about copy. It's how you engineer the code. Make sure there's no bug, right? And also,
Yes.
or if something is a problem, somebody can fix it, right? The third is transferability. I call 3T: transparency, traceability, transferability. So can transfer to somebody else. Somebody can take over, continue enhancing, improving, and also finally they can supporting that function. To me, that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. We know that one of the challenges with machine learning, just in general, is, we always say bad data in, bad data, bad model out, right? And, is AI and machine learning are really permeating every single aspect of our lives. How can we make sure, as scientists, as small business owners, as folks that are trying to use this technology as much as possible, that the data is valid and that we're using it the right way?
Well, this is the most critical question because AI is aiming algorithm. B mean big data. C mean computing. I call ABC, very simple. A is algorithm, B is big data, C is computing. Very natural, right? Flow. So assume algorithm is a cooking-ware, then data is going to be like a food you cook, right? So data has to have a good fresh, has a good source. So the food is very tasty, right? So you can do. So what I mean, if data is I call the 3B problem. The broken because you collect data at different time, and the second called bad, baseline bad. Is you have poor baseline, which means when you compare data in different baseline, but like if you have a jet engine, takeoff, cruise landing, that's a baseline, right? So if you don't have baseline, you just take all the data of engine. That's a wait a minute. I don't understand what that means. Third, background. Background means you have to know what the background is, right? And the weather conditions, the wind turbine, or your data running what condition. So the 3B problems, normally we have to label them. So today, a lot of companies have lots of data. I often say that data may be useful, but you have to evaluate whether data is usable, right? Just like I donate my blood, blood's useful. But if I'm HIV carrier, then my blood may not be usable. I'm sorry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
yeah.
same thing. Data useful may not be usable. Why not usable? Because you have a 3B problem. Broken, the bad background, and the poor baseline, right? So if a company has a lot of data, but it doesn't mean they are AI ready. They are machine learning ready. They're not really. You have to label them, prepare them, make sure they are AI ready. That process is investment. It's not free lunch. Nobody
That's right.
helps you, right? So we work with many companies. I don't have to mention name, but sometimes people tell me I got a lot of data. We spend a month work with them. Then we finally came back. I'm sorry to tell you, 80% of your data is not usable. Maybe they're useful, but not usable, right? To make them AI ready. So I said, oh, how could that happen? Well, because when you collect them, you did not prepare them for machine learning purposes. Am I correct? So from now on, if you want to do a predictive system or you want machine learning ready, you have to prepare them with a baseline, with a background, with a label, and with the right regime, working regime. So you sort them by types, have a clear purpose, right? So from now on, I would say, in order to streamline the data and make sure the data are good for AI environment, we need to identify 3P structure. First P is the purpose, right? What do you want? I'm a company. I want to manage my XYZ, my cost, okay? Or my quality, or my throughputs, or my efficiency, or my emission. So everyone's purpose. Am I correct? Okay. From
Yes,
that purpose,
yes.
go back to the problem source. The problem source, where are the things we need to focus on, right? Then in order to know what data you want to collect, then you develop process to enable that purpose, right? So purpose first, problem source identified, baseline, then a process enable you develop AI toward that purpose.
Yes.
Then
Yep.
if you do that, then your data will be always useful and usable.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the issues that, you know, one of the great things about these models that are out there now on the commercial market is they are so easy to use. They're easy to train. The problem is they always give you an answer.
Yeah.
And if your data is bad, it's going to give you a bad answer. And if you can't tell the difference between that, whether, you know, your evaluation, how you're looking at it, the metrics, then, you know, it could be detrimental to an awful lot of people that it's not really intended to be like. Well, Dr. Lee, where can folks find you at?
Well, I'm you can Google University of Maryland mechanical engineering. You can find me easily. My website in Industrial AI Center at University of Maryland. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And it's always fantastic to have you here again. I love hearing about the quality work that you all are doing there. It's absolutely fantastic. Thank you again for being here, and we'll definitely talk more about the data issues that and, you know, the biases and those sort of things that really impact our lives,
Yes.
you know, a lot more as we move forward. With that, you know, thank you again.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation. All rights reserved.